Hello, everyone. All right, let's take a look here at lesson six. For lesson six, we are talking about a number of different things, investments, and how investments grow and how much they can grow to based on certain interest that they have. So there's a bunch of definitions that I really need to give to you first, and I want you to become familiar with these before you move on to the next section. And so I'll give you my definitions of these terms, and then we'll talk a little bit about um, some questions that you might see, something that you might see on a test, and then do some quick calculations for this first video, anyways. So, first of all, to invest. Well, the term to invest means to commit money in order to gain financial return. So you put money into something and then you get money back out of it, hopefully. Usually, you can invest something in a bank and they'll give you an interest rate and then your money will grow. Sometimes, if you've heard of a thing called the stock market, you'll invest money into something and then it will lose its value, so you'll actually lose money on it. But generally, invest means to commit money in order to gain financial return. Interest. Interest is how much is paid for the use of money as a percent. So you can have good interest and bad interest. Good interest is interest that grows on an investment. Bad interest is interest that grows, that kind of accrues, not grows, I guess it does grow, but that accrues on a loan. And so we'll talk about that more in a little bit. The term principal, not like the principal of our school, but when we're talking finances, it's the original amount of money invested or borrowed. So it's kind of what you start with. The interest rate itself is the rate at which you are charged to borrow money, and it's as a percentage usually. So let's move on to time. In this case, when we're talking about interest, simple interest and compound interest and loans and budgeting, things like that, time is the length of time of the investment or the loan. So whenever I say that in a question, that's what it means. It means how long the investment goes or the loan goes. Simple interest. Simple interest is interest counted only on the principal and it's in dollars. And so if a question says, what is the simple interest? And you'll see what I mean when we go over some questions. But when it says, what is the simple interest? It's the interest counted only on the principal. So the amount of money you start with, you calculate the percentage of interest and you add them together. That gets you the amount. The sum of the principal and the interest together is the amount at the end. Okay, so those are some definitions that you need to know. Stop and go back over them if you need to. Maybe listen to some of the questions that we are going to go through in the next video, and then come back and see these so you can get a really good grasp on what these mean. Here's an example of some things that I wanted to introduce you to and some questions you might see on a test. So example one says, read the sentences below and fill in the blanks with one of the words given in the box. One word is used twice. So we've got all of these words here: a GIC, penalty, interest, term, risk, safe, and certificate. So we are going to kind of go through and see what these mean by filling in the blanks here. So a bank account usually gives a pretty low rate of interest. And you can get a pretty low rate of interest from a bank account, which is nice. Investments that give a higher rate of interest also have a higher rate of risk, is the next word. So actually, if you want to invest your money, usually you can do it and get a higher rate of interest, which means you'll make more money on it, but there will be more of a risk involved. That means that your investment could go under, where like maybe the company that you're investing in doesn't do well. So there's more risk involved. One particular investment that is very low risk but pays a higher rate of interest is called a guaranteed investment certificate. Guaranteed investment certificate. It's a GIC for short. Okay. A GIC is very safe, is the word, because it's guaranteed by the bank. An amount of money deposited for a fixed length of time, an amount of money deposited for a fixed length of time is called a term deposit. However, there is usually a penalty if the money is removed before the end of, and here's the second one that we use, for the end of the term. Okay, so go back and listen to those again and reread them if you need to understand what they mean. Okay, here are some examples of how to calculate a percentage of a number. We need to know this because we are going to use percentages with numbers to find out how much money we make in an investment or how much money we owe in a loan. So first, to find 1% of 1,500. Well, of in math, typically it means multiply. So 1% of 1,500. I'm first going to take my percentage and I'm going to make it a decimal. So I'm going to take 1% and divide by 100, okay, to get 0.01. And then I'm going to take that decimal, and because of in math means multiply, I'm going to multiply 0.01 by 1,500. So 0.01 times 1,500 is 15. That means 1% of 1,500 is 15. B, 25% of 80. Well, again, step one, we're going to take 25% and divide by 100 to get 0.25. So the percentage as a decimal. And then step two, we're going to multiply that decimal by our amount. So 0.25 times 80 equals 20. So 25% of 80 is 20. Now, you could have figured both of those out in your head, but it gets a little bit harder as you go. If you can do the mental math, great. All you have to do is write it down on the question. C is 115% of 30. So that means I'm going to have more than 30. I'm going to have 30 and 15 more percent. But 115% as a decimal is 1.15. I multiply that decimal in step two by 30 to get 3450. So 3450 is 115% of 30. And finally, 0.75% of 62. Be very careful here. 0.75% is a percentage still. It's not the decimal. The decimal version of that percentage, you still have to divide by 100, so you get 0.0075. Watch for that on a test, okay? Just be very, very careful. It's still, if it has the percent sign, it's still a percentage. You still have to divide it by 100 to get the decimal. And then step two means I take my decimal and 0.0075 and times it by 62. And so 0.075% of 62 is 0.465.